Land Relationship Visioning, a digital self-guided resource for First Nation land practitioners, developed with input from the Canadian Wildlife Service of Environment and Climate Change Canada, Cambium Indigenous Professional Services, and the Ontario Aboriginal Lands Association. Land Relationship Visioning is a multi-process, community-driven exercise designed to identify your community's significant spaces and species, and develop a decision-making process to protect them. It is a plan for the future relationship between your community and the land. Land relationship. Visioning enables Indigenous-led conservation that can influence community decisions when determining priorities for the present and future. Land relationship visioning is a community-led approach to land use planning, envisioning a relationship to the land, past, present, and future. It takes the use out of planning to reflect a more holistic approach that includes community-identified needs and priorities that extend beyond Western land use planning practices. This is the second version of this toolkit. The main components of this updated resource is significant species, identification and documentation of significant species as determined through community engagement. Significant spaces, identification and documentation of significant spaces as determined through community engagement. Invasive species, community education about invasive species to understand best management practices. Climate change, enhance community understanding of climate change impacts to inform adaptation and mitigation. Informed decision-making. Using information gathered throughout the LRV process, make decisions to inform a holistic land relationship vision. This toolbox is designed to support your effort to understand and document a land relationship vision for your community. Included within this toolbox is a narrated, phased slide deck, which provides technical knowledge and support to guide the process. Community engagement ideas are also included within every module to assist in information gathering and sharing processes. Within this toolbox, you will find practical tools, including integrated Microsoft Word and Excel templates to document your findings. Lastly, this toolbox has links to external sources, contained throughout the slide deck, and within the tab One Resource Table included in Toolset 1. There are 8 modules contained within this toolkit. Module 1. Understanding the process. What is land relationship visioning and why is it important? Module 2. Understanding significant species and natural heritage inventories. How to complete a species inventory to guide your land relationship vision. Module 3. Understanding significant spaces and natural heritage features. How to identify and document key habitats and other important spaces within your community. Module 4. Invasive species. Stewardship, understanding invasive species to inform community decision-making. Module 5. Mapping your vision. The importance of and various approaches of mapping as a visioning tool. Module 6. Understanding climate change to inform the vision. Climate change considerations for community planning. Module 7. Land relationship visioning as a collaborative tool. Using the tool to bridge gaps. Module 8. Using your vision to guide community decisions. Compiling information collected throughout the process to guide community-based decisions and processes. Each module is designed to provide guidance throughout your LRV process. Some modules may be more relevant to your community's needs. You do not have to follow through every module to create a wholesome land relationship vision. Each aspect of this toolkit is designed to help with the development and implementation of a land relationship vision. Each component of this toolkit can be a part of land relationship visioning, but it is not what makes the vision the vision. The vision is defined by the community. Module 1. Understanding the land relationship visioning process. What is land relationship visioning, and why is it important? In this section, we will discuss what is land relationship visioning, bridging knowledge, practical uses of LRV, the keys to land relationship visioning, tool, important resources for land relationship visioning, and the engagement opportunity, community outreach. Land relationship. Visioning is important for many reasons. It can ensure that ecosystems are connected by providing corridors and reproductive areas for wildlife, aiding species in migration and adaptation. This allows for the reconnection, maintenance, or enhancement of relationship between the community and land. Land use planning is very important and can be a direct result of land relationship visioning. It ensures development takes place in spaces without significant features. The goal is to maintain or even enhance functioning habitats, plant and animal populations, and other significant spaces within your community. Additionally, land relationship visioning can help communities to get ahead of industrial development pressures and control environment-based decisions for the community. It gives power to the community. Lastly, and most important, land relationship visioning ensures lands and waters are cared for now and for the generations to come. Land relationship visioning, bridging First Nations knowledge and Western science. Western science is technical and data-driven. This includes the naming of species, the designation of species at risk, and critical habitat. Data-driven processes are important and useful, but do not account for specific community knowledge, informed by generations of environmental observations. Bridging these knowledge systems and priorities should be used to inform decision-making. Land relationship visioning and land use planning are similar but not the same. LRV is a more holistic approach towards relationality that aims to incorporate an understanding of relation to the land, whereas land use planning is more data-driven to manage growth and resources. Although they are similar, there are many differences. Despite these differences, they intersect at long-term visioning, community well-being, engagement and collaboration, climate adaptation, and mapping. There are several keys to successful land relationship visioning. This vision should reflect your community by including community values and voices. It should include long-range goals and protect the land for future generations. Lastly, your land relationship vision should link to wider community initiatives, such as initiatives in economic development, education, culture, and language. Practical ways that land relationship visioning can be and has been used in community: inform land use planning and zoning designations, inform community planning and key priorities for the future, engage community for active participation in lands and environment initiatives, communicate and understand environmental priorities to community and leadership, update old maps and traditional knowledge interviews, identify and catalog species and spaces incorporating traditional language, identify and catalog community knowledge carriers and elders, and bridge relationships with outside organizations. It's time for the practitioner's digital toolset number 1. Important digital resources to build knowledge and capacity. You will find toolset number 1 in your digital package, titled Table of Resources. This table serves as a mini database of outside resources that will be useful when visualizing your land relationship. It includes resources for conservation planning in Canada and Ontario, information and legislations about species at risk, and more that will be discussed later as we make our way through each module. You can also use this space to keep track of past projects within the community that are relevant to LRV, such as past land use or community plans, links to projects within the community, traditional ecological knowledge interviews, and more. Engagement exercise for Module 1, initiating the process in your community. Begin to communicate with community about the LRV process using information from this slide deck. Develop a survey to identify key people and past projects that can inform the LRV. Survey questions could include, what are some key environmental priorities for you? Are you interested in sharing community stories? Are you interested in sharing knowledge about species? Are there past projects or TK interviews that could inform LRV? Are there maps that you know about that could inform LRV? How often do you get out on the land? Are you interested in enhancing environment around community? Ensure there is a timeline and incentive for participating in the survey. Use the survey as an initial starting point to inform the community about LRV and gauge interest in participation. Key takeaways from Module 1. Land relationship visioning is a process that is to be led by a community for the community and will help understand the lands, waters, and species the community values most. Take time to understand LRV by reviewing the tool for this module to understand different available resources. Begin to engage the community and identify community members that are passionate and support the community's efforts. Module 2, Understanding Significant Species and Natural Heritage Inventories. How to complete a species inventory to guide your land relationship vision. In this section, we will discuss understanding natural heritage inventories, identifying significant species in the community, using existing species data, documenting significant species in your community. The tool for this section, Species at Risk Tables and Community Inventory Template. The engagement opportunity for Module 2 is a Community Bio Blitz. Natural Heritage Inventories. Understanding what is important to your community. A natural heritage inventory will identify and document the important species and spaces in your community. This will help you understand what is where and will help guide your vision. Indigenous knowledge systems often identify natural heritage features, as they are closely linked to community cultural ties to the land. It is important to understand that a combination of Western science-based data collection and the use of your community's land-based knowledge will produce the most fulsome natural heritage inventory. Why should you develop a natural heritage inventory? There are many benefits to natural heritage inventories. They can help to identify important species, such as identifying legislated species at risk and other species important to your community. Natural heritage inventories also help to identify important spaces, such as important ecosystems and other areas to be protected, like sensitive habitat or culturally important spaces within your community. Lastly, natural heritage inventories can help plan for the future. They help to anticipate effects of different land uses so that there is a plan. It is important to understand that some species have legal protection. Here we call them legislated species. There is federal legislation, such as the Species at Risk Act, that aims to prevent Canadian Indigenous species from becoming extirpated or extinct, and to provide for the recovery and management of endangered and threatened species to prevent them from becoming further at risk. The Endangered Species Act is Ontario provincial legislation that aims to protect species and their habitats that are at risk. The overall aim is to promote the recovery of species that are at risk. There are also other pieces of legislation that protect wildlife, plants, and animals, including but not limited to the Migratory Birds Convention Act, the Fisheries Act, and the Fish and Wildlife Conservation Act. It is critical to the LRV process that priority species are identified by community. When identifying species in your community, it is important to understand the diversity of species that may be present. Using community knowledge helps develop a customized inventory that is particular to your community's values, history, and culture. Significant plant and animal species could include important biocultural species to your community, or important species known to be historically, traditionally, or culturally important. Species identified by other sources could include rare species, or important keystone species known to be important to the health of an ecosystem. Significant species. What exactly does that mean? Any plant or animal species that is identified by community as significant. There are many reasons why it may be significant, and that is unique to the community. The overall vision for your relationship with the land is heavily influenced by what kind of species are identified for protection. These can be species that are important to traditional economies, species protected by the Species at Risk Act, or the Endangered Species Act, species important to cultural practices, other species identified by community, ecologically important species, and species protected by other legislation. Overall, there may be many species that are important to your community and that need to be incorporated into your land relationship vision for protection. Protecting one species will inherently protect others who depend on it, so it is important to understand that any species can be deemed significant. There are many ways to document species found within your community. You can use legislated species at risk lists. Look at species at risk lists to determine if there are species within the Species at Risk Act and the Endangered Species Act that may exist within your community and traditional territories. You can also double check with other lists to determine if there are any other species to note. These may be lists by past researchers or knowledge holders. Engaging with the community is crucial when determining important community species. Work with community leaders, youth, elders, and harvesters to identify and note the species of concern for your community and traditional territories. Lastly, document your community's comprehensive list. Document the species in your community that require special attention and guidance to protect them using a species inventory table. What is a species inventory table, and how do you use one? A species inventory table is a way to document species that have been identified within the community. Different species may be documented for different reasons and have various degrees of significance. There are some species that are protected by law. This could be your community's laws or federal provincial laws, and protecting them can ensure they are around for future generations. You can use a species inventory table to organize information about community species. In this example table, species that are protected by law are dark gray and have X's marked for the legislation they fall under. Another example of how to organize the information is to include whether the species is a food source or culturally significant, as shown in the table. You can always add, take away, or change information in your species inventory table. The information included should be examined and revised every so often for your community. This will ensure that information is accurate. Most often, you will end up adding information to the table, resulting in more robust and in-depth information over time. Again, it is important to remember that species to include in your inventory are completely up to what your community sees as significant. These can be species that are often seen in the community or rare to see. They can be species that you know about or new species you want to record. It is good to record all species, plant, and animal that are in the community. Now that you know what a species inventory table is, it is time to move on to the tool set number 2. This tool will allow you to complete your own species inventory for your community. Go to your digital package, and you will find two Excel spreadsheets to document important species. Tab 2A, SARA, designations is a fillable, sortable, and searchable table of legislated species that are currently recognized by the federal government as species at risk. You can use this list as a database of important species that may be subject to legal protection or have recovery plans already in place that may prove useful for your land relationship vision. It is important to also understand what species are at risk provincially, as the Species at Risk Act looks at a federal level. The second spreadsheet, tab 2B, Cultural Species, is an important community species log template. This is a fillable, sortable, and searchable table to be filled in by you, the practitioner. Use this to document other important species in your community that have been identified by community members. This allows you to keep track of what species are present in your community and what species are considered important or valuable. What should be protected for the future? As mentioned before, species can be wildlife that include both plants and animals. Important community species may be medicinal, spiritual, food source, or any other species considered important by your community. The engagement exercise for Module 2 focuses on community engagement to identify species, including a community BioBlitz. A BioBlitz is a communal citizen science effort to record as many species within a designated location and time period as possible. It is a great way to engage the community in connecting to their environment while generating useful data for science and conservation. A community BioBlitz will help build capacity to address the community land relationship vision. In order to organize your BioBlitz, you will have to determine the size and scope of your BioBlitz. Pick the place of the event and determine the target audience. If younger youth are involved, consider a simpler version of BioBlitz by creating a nature scavenger hunt. Determine a platform to collect your data. iNaturalist is a great resource. Just ensure data privacy is considered. Consider a backyard BioBlitz, where participants capture species in their yards. Create species ID cards of commonly found species within the community or territory. Recruit community members to participate in the BioBlitz. Report BioBlitz information back to the community for further engagement. Make it fun with prizes for participation. Consider creating a contest for most species observed. Find the BioBlitz in a box link in the Module 1 tool. Table of resources for more information. After reviewing Module 2, you should have an understanding of natural heritage inventories, what they are, why they are important, and how to use them. Engage the community to undertake a BioBlitz to help determine the species in your community that are important. A community BioBlitz will be a great head start in filling your species inventory tables. Use the digital tools provided to begin to document the important species in your community. Module 3. Understanding significant spaces and natural heritage features. How to identify and document natural heritage features and other important spaces within your community. In this section, we will discuss understanding significant spaces, understanding natural heritage features, ecological integrity, documenting and protecting significant spaces, the tool, documenting significant spaces, and the engagement idea, getting community on the land. Spaces are just as important as species. When understanding your land relationship vision, it is important to include and protect the spaces where important species live. If a community doesn't understand the places that important species need to live, we may lose those species forever. Protecting significant spaces also protects significant species. You can't do one without the other. In this context, significant spaces means community-identified important spaces. Significant spaces will look different depending on what is considered important by the community. And important spaces for ecological integrity. Spaces that should be identified as significant based off their function in the natural environment. This coincides with natural heritage features. Significant spaces can be within reserve boundaries, as well as within traditional or treaty territory. There are many spaces that can be identified as significant. They are very specific to each community and should be identified through community engagement and historical records. Some significant spaces might be past, current, or future hunting or trapping areas, spaces where medicine or food is harvested, spaces used for ceremony, spaces for community gatherings, and any spaces tied to community stories and history. You cannot identify significant spaces without community. Spaces that are identified by the community encourage community input and responsibility to the vision. When these spaces are documented, it is easier to make educated and collective decisions. Take this opportunity to educate community about environmental concerns. Community identified significant spaces will often coincide with natural heritage features and spaces with high ecological integrity. A natural heritage feature is a natural area that is part of a natural heritage system, such as, but not limited to, cliffs, wetlands, woodlands, wildlife habitats, meadows, fish habitats, streams, and habitat of endangered or threatened species. These features make up natural heritage systems that are important for supporting biodiversity and ecological processes, as well as ecosystem gifts. Through documenting natural heritage features, you can document and protect spaces where species live. Protecting natural heritage features means preventing habitat loss. Habitat loss is a general term for the loss of habitat that will negatively influence biodiversity directly through its impact on vital species. Protecting natural heritage features also means preventing habitat degradation. Habitat degradation is a general term describing the processes by which habitat quality is reduced. This may result from natural processes such as drought, storms, or fire, and through human activities such as forestry, agriculture, and urbanization. It is important to be on the lookout for habitat loss and habitat degradation when considering significant spaces for protection. Understanding what kinds of habitat types exist is key to developing a land relationship vision. There are many different kinds of habitat that may be present within one area. Look closely to determine different habitat characteristics. Some examples of important wildlife habitat would be rare or specialized habitats like alvars or old-growth forests, seasonal concentration areas like deer overwintering areas, turtle nesting habitat, bat roosting areas, and migratory bird stopovers, aquatic habitat like lakes, rivers, cold water streams, and ponds, terrestrial habitat like shorelines, forests, grasslands, shrublands, and wetlands, and Rare plant communities like those found on prairies, savannas, and alvars. Rare plant communities are often part of rare or specialized habitats. Both high and low quality habitats require protection. High quality habitats have a diversity of structure and composition, free from human disturbance, and therefore support more biodiversity than degraded habitat. On the reverse side, less high quality habitat may have to be protected if it was at one time high quality and home to important species. Measures for protection and restoration may be possible. Some spaces are at higher risk than others. This should be accounted for when documenting significant spaces. Water bodies and wetlands are the most threatened ecosystems due to human activity like land development, pollution, and climate change. Riparian areas are also at higher risk due to shoreline modification, invasive species, and pollution. Riparian areas provide a variety of ecological gifts, including water purification, erosion control, and wildlife habitat. Habitats located close to, or in residential or recreational areas, or near roads, have their associated species at higher risk than similar habitats found in areas with no roads or low population density. There are many elements to a single habitat. There can be many ecological characteristics in one space. These different habitat characteristics make up habitat profiles, including biotic factors. A key component of what makes good habitat for a species relates to food and energy required to successfully complete its life cycle. This may include dependency on other species, not just for food. Water. Water is key to life, and different species have very specific requirements. Their habitat may be defined by specific water quality and quantity needs. Abiotic factors, the physical requirements for a species to successfully complete its life cycle, such as particular soils or temperatures. Space. Space may be defined as the area a species requires to complete its life cycle, including breeding habitat, nursery habitat, and overwintering habitat. Everything is connected and depends on each other. Impacting one element can significantly affect the species that live there. The Provincial Parks and Conservation Reserves Act, 2006, defines ecological integrity as a condition in which biotic and abiotic components of ecosystems and the composition and abundance of native species and biological communities are characteristic of their natural regions, and rates of change and ecosystem processes are unimpeded. The heart of ecological integrity is the naturalness of an area. Ecosystems have integrity when they have mixture of living and non-living parts, and the interactions between these parts are not disturbed by human activity. When ecological integrity is compromised, the diversity of life becomes vulnerable, and the ability of ecosystem gifts is compromised. There are three core parts of an ecosystem that contribute to ecological integrity. Structure includes all the living and non-living, biotic and abiotic components. Composition, the variety of living things that are found within the ecosystem. Biodiversity. Function includes all the natural processes that occur within an ecosystem: predator, prey cycles, fire, nutrient cycling, hydrologic cycle. It is important to maintain ecological integrity so that the core parts of an ecosystem are not compromised, and so that ecosystem gifts are not compromised as well. One way to protect habitat is to make room for ecological buffers. Ecological buffers are important for land relationship visioning because they are a way to allow development to continue within your community while also protecting significant spaces or wildlife habitat. Ecological buffers are spaces between an area you wish to protect and the disturbance that will impact it. They are used to insulate a protected natural area from the impacts of adjacent land uses. They have the ability to protect the natural feature or function of interest and mitigate the impact of stressors arising from the existing or anticipated land use outside the feature or area of functions. Ecological buffers are sometimes called protection zones or vegetative protection zones, as found in the Oak Ridges Moraine Conservation Plan, Greenbelt Plan, and Lake Simcoe Protection Plan. Examples of ecological buffer zones include riparian zones, upland buffers, and shoreline buffer zones. More information and guidelines for using ecological buffers are included in the Module 1 tool, Table of Resources. Documenting important spaces allows you to keep those spaces protected. Identify important spaces using Species Inventory Table. Review your species inventory table to determine what habitats are important to key species and your community. Identify sensitive information. It may be in the best interest of the species and your community to keep certain locations private, such as endangered plants and animals known to be collected and sold. These needs should be identified as well. Begin to consider acceptable protection measures. Work with community leaders, youth, elders, and knowledge holders to begin to determine what would be acceptable protection measures to your community for important species and spaces. Protecting spaces is an important part of land relationship visioning. Begin to move from identification to protection. As a community understands their key species and key habitats, they can move to begin to protect them. Prioritize the spaces at the most risk. Spaces that are susceptible to degradation or destruction by natural processes or human activities are in greatest need of protection. You can use the Module 1, Tool tab number 1. Table of Resources to learn more about how to protect wildlife species habitat. It is time for the practitioner's toolset number 3, Tools to Document Community Habitats. Go to your digital package, and you will find tab 3A, Cultural Spaces, and tab 3B, Habitat Identification. These are fillable, sortable, and searchable Excel spreadsheets to document species habitat and important spaces within your community. As you complete your engagement with your community, you can begin to document the cultural spaces and wildlife habitat that are present and to be protected using the spreadsheet. You can gather as much detail as you choose about your spaces and add columns as required. As this table gets full of community-driven information, you can cut and paste your results into any Microsoft document for reporting, proposals, and/or presentations. These resources will allow you to efficiently document significant spaces and habitats in your community. The engagement exercise for Module 3 focuses on community participation in habitat identification and important cultural spaces. Community input is important when identifying and documenting important areas in your community. Collaborating with youth, elders, and knowledge holders will prove beneficial when collecting information. Learn about the land while on the land. Visit significant spaces in person with knowledgeable community members to trigger memories. Go to significant spaces that may be identified through conversation. Visit those places by walking, boating, or other means of accessible transportation. Visit these places in each season to understand the seasonality of a site. Simply listen to stories and ask where to identify significant spaces to visit. After Module 3, you should have an understanding of important habitats and spaces. It is important to begin to understand community habitats and significant places to support biodiversity and vital species. In the provincial language, these are natural heritage features. Documenting these important spaces will help lead to acceptable forms of protection. The community is an excellent source of knowledge for locating wildlife habitats and cultural spaces. Information gathered from community voices can be documented in the digital tools provided as inventory templates in this module and modules before. Module 4, Invasive Species Stewardship. The importance of identifying and managing invasive species. In this section, we will discuss what is an invasive species, pathways of spread, types of invasives, actions against invasives, kinship and invasives, tool, invasive species, stewardship planning tool, and engagement, invasive species bingo. Invasive species have no boundaries. Invasive species are plants, animals, insects, and pathogens that are introduced to an area and cause harm to the environment, economy, or society. Non-native species aren't automatically considered invasive species just because they come from a different area of the world. They must also cause negative environmental, economic, or social impacts. Environmental impacts, economic impacts, and social impacts. A species is considered invasive when it is introduced to an ecosystem outside of its native range, and it has potential impacts on the ecology, the economy, or society in its introduced range. In order for a species to become invasive, it must possess the ability to outcompete and overwhelm native species in its introduced range. There are a number of traits characteristic to invasive species to facilitate this ecological advantage. If an invasive species is undetected and unregulated, it can become established in the environment and spread uncontrollably across the landscape. Introductions like this can cause immeasurable impacts to economy, ecology, and social values. Invasive species introductions are commonly regarded as the second greatest threat to global biodiversity, next to habitat loss. Invasive species compete with native species for resources like space, light, water, and food. They can also directly prey on native species, in the case of invasive species like wild pigs or northern giant hornets, or carry diseases and parasites that can spread to native species. Through these activities, invasive species reduce biodiversity and can put native species at risk. The loss of native species, such as certain plant and tree species, can also decrease shade for forest floor plants, reduce nutrient resources, and have cascading effects in terrestrial and aquatic ecosystems. Ecosystem gifts can be significantly impacted by the loss of native species and alteration of habitat. Invasive species can pose significant threats to tradition and culture. Invasive species can outcompete medicines, food, and other culturally significant species. Asian longhorned beetle is a threat to Canadian maples, an important piece of cultural identity for many. Invasive species can also impact First Nation communities by reducing the availability of culturally important species, such as the loss of American ginseng, impacted by garlic, mustard, as a component of traditional medicine, or the loss of ash trees, impacted by emerald ash borer, as an important source of material for traditional activities like basket making. Pathways are routes by which an invasive species is transferred from one ecosystem to another. Boating and fishing are two common pathways for the spread of invasive species. There are several different measures you can put in place to ensure that you are doing your best to prevent the spread while out on the water. Some species can easily stick onto boat trailers, motors, or transducers, or be present in any lake water in the boat, like bait buckets, live wells, and the bilge. These species can travel with you when you move your boat over land to a new water body and establish themselves. Pet release and accidental escapees. Owning an aquarium with exotic species can be an enjoyable pastime. However, some of these species have the potential to survive in our waters and outcompete our native species for resources. This also includes ponds and water gardens. To avoid accidental release of species from ponds or water gardens, they should be placed away from natural waterways or areas that might experience flooding. Never dispose aquatic exotic pets or plants into natural waterways. Trail use. You can help prevent the spread of invasive species when you're on the trails by cleaning your shoes, pets, and gear before arriving and before leaving a natural space. Invasive plant seeds have the ability to stick onto these items and spread along the trail, or even come back home with you. Gardening and horticulture can be a great hobby and way to spend time outdoors, but it is important to educate yourself on what you are planting. Some plant species are invasive and have the potential to spread outside of your garden, outcompeting native species for resources. Some invasive species can be purchased in stores, including common garden plants such as periwinkle and goutweed. You can help prevent the spread of invasive species from your garden by planting native species instead. E-commerce. The ability to easily buy and sell live organisms online provides a high-risk pathway for the importation of non-native organisms into Canada. Issues related to e-commerce as a pathway include inaccurate or unclear taxonomic information provided by sellers, limited consumer knowledge regarding items purchased and associated risk, challenges regarding the regulation of this pathway, and the subsequent release or escape of these organisms into Canada's natural environment. Don't move firewood. The movement of firewood plays a significant role in the accidental spread of invasive insects, as firewood and its bark can harbor eggs and larvae of invasive insects. It is extremely important that you do not transport these invasive insects outside of their regulated area. Burning firewood in the same location where it was purchased is one of the surest ways to avoid spreading any invasive insects. Ballast water is drawn in at the ship's origin and must be pumped out at its destination prior to unloading the ship's cargo. Many organisms can survive within this water as the ship crosses into new areas, including species like zebra mussels. The Great Lakes are a major pathway for ocean freighters to ship cargo to and from Canada to overseas. There are many different types of invasive species that you may not even think about or be aware of. Invasive fish and invertebrates pose a significant threat to all water bodies, from small streams to large lakes to oceans. Invasive fish and invertebrates can outcompete native species, alter ecosystem function, and reduce critical habitat. These changes can have cascading effects on biodiversity, the fishing industry, recreational activities, property values, and more. Human activity, including recreational boating and fishing, is a primary mechanism of spread for invasive fish and invertebrates. It is important to understand what kinds of invasive species may be threatening your local biodiversity when developing your land relationship vision. Invasive aquatic plants pose serious threats to all water bodies. They damage ecosystems, displace native vegetation, reduce water quality, and negatively impact recreation. When invading aquatic plants die, decomposers that break down the plant matter consume large amounts of oxygen in the water and consequently create an inhospitable environment for native aquatic species. Invasive plants include non-native trees, shrubs, and plants that are spread by global trade, human and animal transport, and horticulture. Many invasive plants are not suitable as a food source for wildlife and can greatly reduce biodiversity in forests and urban green spaces. Invasive forest insects are a problem for all types of forest, urban, commercial, and natural. Once an invasion takes hold, it can easily spread into natural and commercial forests. Invasive insect species can greatly disturb and potentially eliminate plant species that host invasive insects. Invasive pathogens. Invasive forest pathogens are usually the result of a fungal infection and are a problem for all types of forests, urban, commercial, and natural. Impacts of invasive pathogens include reduced aesthetic and intrinsic value of forests and urban green spaces, reduced property values, and economic impacts to commercial forests. Invasive land animals and invertebrates. Invasive land animals and invertebrates present a significant threat to terrestrial ecosystems because of their ability to spread disease, prey on or compete with native species, hybridize, and alter other important natural systems, such as vegetation growth and soil quality. Invasive land animals and invertebrates can accelerate biodiversity loss and cause disturbance, impacting the health of natural ecological communities. The images in this slide are hyperlinked, so you can click on the images to learn more. Alternatively, Use Tool tab number 1 Table of Resources to learn more about the types of invasive species that might affect your territory. Actions against invasives. Prevention is the most cost-effective solution for managing invasive species. Public awareness is essential for this stage. Eradication means removing a species population in its entirety. If populations are localized, eradication is possible. Containment to reduce further spread of an introduced species. As populations increase, eradication becomes increasingly unlikely, and priorities shift to preventing further spread. Long-term control is the most costly stage of invasive species management. Eradication is unlikely to impossible, and instead, focus on limiting populations and protecting remaining resources. The invasion curve shows the stages of invasive species management from pre-arrival, prevention, to long-term control. After a species is introduced, management costs increase, and likelihood of eradication decreases as time passes. You can find more information at invasivespeciescenter.ca. When determining how to approach invasive species stewardship, it is important to view invasives through a kinship lens. Aim to understand them, and how they came to be here, and how they might be able to be utilized in some way. When planning for invasive species work, slow down to try to understand and learn from the species arriving. Are they replacing culturally significant beings? Can you make more robust decisions by considering 7 generations? Respect the species at every life stage. Think about how you will dispose of respectfully and efficiently, give thanks, or repurpose. Taking time to understand the species will allow you to learn from it. As an example, dandelions and plantains are actually non-native, invasive species, but are used in traditional medicines. Other examples include herbaceous garlic mustard being used for seasoning, or how berries from an introduced plant might be cooked into jams. Although it is important to do some research about arriving species to ensure there are no adverse side effects. Practitioner's Digital Toolset Number 4. Invasive Species. Stewardship Planning Tool. In your digital package, you will find the following supporting digital tools in Microsoft Word and Excel. Invasive Species, Stewardship Planning Guide. Invasive Species, Stewardship. Planning Template, Invasive Species. Inventory Template. This tool will guide you through the planning and implementation of invasive species stewardship in your community. Play bingo with the community to educate them about invasive species and what invasive species look like. This way, community members can become informed about invasive species and spot them out in the community. These sightings can then be reported to populate your invasive species table. Create a fun and educational opportunity by teaching community about local invasives. Provide prizes for winners. Find the bonus tool for this engagement section within the toolkit. Pre-made bingo cards with common invasive species. Some invasive species may be out of range for your community or territory. Ensure the species you use are relevant to the community. Click on the DIY Bingo Maker link to make your own. The link is also in the Module 1, Table of Resources. Invasive species have many different ways that they spread from one place to another. Invasive species occur everywhere and affect everything. They can outcompete native species and limit wildlife habitat. It is important to take time to understand the invasive species, view them with a lens of kinship to determine their potential use or purpose. Module 5, Mapping Your Vision. The importance of and various approaches to mapping. In this section, we will discuss the importance and use of mapping, data considerations, mapping approaches, field mapping, hands-on mapping, scale map and image markup, digitizing paper maps, geographic information systems, GIS, and multimedia mapping. Uses of mapping in LRV and the tool and engagement. Mapping is critically important for land relationship visioning. Maps are simple to understand. They present complex information in a well-understood and accessible format. The mapping process brings community members together to share their ideas and visions, which can ignite a resurgence of interest in sharing knowledge between youth and elders. Maps identify important areas. Through mapping, you are able to preserve ecological systems by identifying intact habitat, such as species at risk habitat, wetlands or woodlands, and culturally significant species and spaces. Mapping is also a way to articulate land-based knowledge. Information collected on maps can help communities articulate this knowledge to external agencies. Maps inform decision-making. They provide a clear record of land-based knowledge, which in turn helps to inform and influence a culturally and environmentally sensitive approach to development. Maps build capacity. They can enable communities to advocate for change and address development conflict, bringing power to the community. Mapping is a way to inform future generations. They allow communities to record and archive local knowledge so that future generations know what was there. They are visions. They can be used to show plans for the future, but also show what the land looked like before. What can we map? Natural heritage such as individual species, land cover, land type, waterways, and you could also expand to include things like water or air quality monitoring. You can also map sites of community importance such as community gathering sites, historic or cultural locations, public or spiritual buildings, and educational and health facilities. Additionally, you can map infrastructure such as roads, bridges, dams, and utilities. All of these are considerations for a land relationship vision. Considerations. Mapping produces data. Data is not just numbers. Data includes your community knowledge, visions, and narratives. Producing maps allows us to capture and share this data, but we need to consider how this data will be used and by who. There are two relevant frameworks for Indigenous data governance: the principles of OCAP and the CARE principles of Indigenous data governance. OCAP and CARE principles. First Nations data sovereignty. OCAP was developed in 1998 and is a registered trademark of the First Nations Information Governance Center, FNIGC. OCAP stands for ownership, control, access, and possession. These principles assert that First Nations have control over data collection processes, and that they own and control how the information can be used. Use the links in the slide to learn more. Open data. CARE principles for Indigenous data governance. The CARE principles are collective benefit, authority to control, responsibility, and ethics. These principles aim to ensure that data is used in a respectful way. They address concerns over ownership of open data and the FAIR principles. FAIR principles were created with a goal of making scientific data more findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. Many of the open source tools like OpenStreetMap will follow these guidelines. Use the links in this slide to learn more. Data sovereignty and technology in this module. A wide range of technology options are available to help with the mapping process. We are providing options for every level of technical expertise and ease of use. Options allow for different levels of ownership over data. Technology options owned by for-profit companies like Google Maps and Google Earth sometimes have access to or ownership over map data created on their platforms. Other open access options, such as OpenStreetMap, have the caveat that all data produced on their platform also be open access. Depending on what you are mapping, you can choose what tools are suitable. Moving forward, different approaches to mapping will be discussed to provide a fulsome understanding of options when deciding to utilize maps and mapping applications in the development of your community's land relationship vision. Your mapping approach will depend on many different factors, including where you are mapping, why you are mapping, and what you are mapping. Different approaches have different uses and considerations in terms of data sovereignty, online and offline, as well as digital and paper. We will review field mapping, hands-on mapping, scale map and image markup, digitizing paper maps, geographic information systems such as QGIS, and finding geospatial data for GIS mapmaking. We will also review online and offline tools. Field mapping, mapping in the field, or while navigating a space. Types of field mapping: bioblitzes for mapping species in an area, and community street audits for broader mapping of sites in a community. Tools for field mapping: hands-on option, such as paper maps, clipboards, and pens. Options to digitize paper maps will be explored later. There are also smartphone options, such as iNaturalist for recording species, or Mapio for more customizable GPS-based mapping. Hands-on mapping is a very simple way to communicate effectively. Essentially, community members draw maps from memory. These maps represent key community-identified features on the land from a bird's-eye view. This method is very simple and is a good starting point for framing important land-based issues and help plan subsequent mapping activities. All you need is a piece of paper, something to write with, and community members interested in sharing their knowledge. Scale map and image markup is another method for mapping. This method is also very simple and is a good way to facilitate conversation and collaboration among community members. With this method, local knowledge is identified through conversation and then drawn or labeled directly onto a photocopied map or printed image. The position of features is determined by looking at their position relative to landmarks such as rivers, lakes, crossings, and other important landmarks in your community. This method is important because it can be used for communicating information to decision makers because they use coordinate systems and projections. To do scale map and image markup, you will need a photocopied map or printed image of your community or an area in your community. You will need post-it notes, stickers, and something to write with. And as always, you need community members and knowledge holders wishing to participate. Digitizing paper maps. Turning maps created in the field into digital data sets that can be shared. There are many different ways to digitize paper maps. One option is OpenStreetMap Field Papers. Use the link in this slide or find the Field Papers resource link in the Module 1 tool table of resources. Make an account on the Field Papers platform and print off a map of your area at any scale. Try printing smaller zoomed-in maps if you want to walk around with them, or print larger areas for tabletop mapping. Different base maps are available, and you can scan your map back in through website. The output is OpenStreetMap, but you can also export as a different file. The next approach to mapping is using Geographic Information Systems, GIS. This method is more complicated and technical, but it is a good way to integrate local knowledge and qualitative data. GIS is a computer hardware and software technology that is used for storing, retrieving, mapping, and analyzing geographic data. There are many resources online and links included in this slide that will help you learn more about GIS. ArcGIS is widely used to log data and create maps. This approach to mapping is very thorough with many options, but it does require training and a subscription to the service. Take a look and determine whether you think GIS would be helpful for you or your community. If so, there are many training opportunities that might be available for you to learn. Quantum Geographic Information System, QGIS, is a free open-source software that lets users work with geospatial data. It can be used for viewing, editing, analyzing, printing, and publishing data. It is a free alternative to ArcGIS or other GIS subscription services. There are many resources available online to learn more about QGIS, or you can look at the resources in the Module 1 tool table of resources to learn more. Finding geospatial data for GIS mapmaking. Use the information contained within this slide to learn more about finding geospatial data. You can also find the resource links in the table of resources from Module 1. The next mapping method to discuss is multimedia and internet-based mapping. This is a great way to document oral and visual aspects of community knowledge. It is also easier to use than GIS but more in-depth than hands-on mapping. There are many different platforms for multimedia and internet-based mapping, including Google Earth. Using Google Earth, you can identify areas in your community that you wish to learn more about. You can identify cultural spaces, wildlife habitats, natural heritage features, or species at risk sightings by using the draw tools to make lines and shapes. After identifying an area using lines and shapes, you can include information within a text box that allows you to write about the area, such as why it is important and if the area or species is facing threats or other relevant information. When in slideshow mode, click on the underlined links to be taken to a resource for more information, or visit the Module 1 table of resources. Another way to use multimedia and internet-based mapping is to use third-party tools such as the Ontario Make-A-Map Natural Heritage Areas application. The Make-A-Map Natural Heritage Areas mapping application displays some of Ontario's natural heritage information, such as wetlands, woodlands, provincial parks, and Natural Heritage Information Centre data. The application can show planning areas and designations for provincial plans. It also displays topographic base information such as roads, rivers, and municipal boundaries. You can zoom in and out, turn information on and off, identify features, and print a map of the displayed information along with your own added text. When in slideshow mode, click on the underlined links to be taken to a resource to learn more about how to use this mapping application and if it will be helpful for you and your community. You can also find these resources in the Module 1 tool, table of resources. Mapeo is a free digital tool set for documenting, monitoring, and mapping many types of data. There is offline access on phone app, and it uses a database system that keeps data locally stored and owned by the community. How to use Mapeo. Download the app from the App Store. Collect data by taking GPS points and categorizing them using customizable categories. Sync data with team members or upload to shared laptop. Export PDF reports or geospatial data. Terra Stories, mapping and sharing place-based stories. Terra Stories is a tool built for mapping and maintaining a database of place-based stories, as opposed to other tools that are designed for telling stories using an interactive map. The tool is very flexible. It allows you to share stories using a variety of audiovisual medias such as text, image, audio, and video. You can collect stories in the field using Mapeo. Terra Stories, mapping and sharing place-based stories. The key features of Terra Stories is offline functionality, custom maps, protected stories, data privacy, and options for multiple communities to collaborate on a Terra Stories map or server. Follow Terra Stories guide from Earth Defenders Toolkit to download software and set up your community. Watch Terra Stories demo. Indigenous Mapping Workshop 2020 for video guidance. Check out how Terra Stories was used. 6 Nations of the Grand River, mapping traditional ecological knowledge and indigenous stories, along with scientific data about water quality. Mapping has been used in a variety of ways to support land relationship visioning. In general, mapping can be used for land relationship visioning too. Document significant species and spaces to visually articulate knowledge. Facilitate community engagement by using maps to identify community needs and priorities. Build capacity by enhancing informed decision-making within community and to external agencies. Advocating for change and addressing land use conflicts. And maps can be used to protect and have ownership and control of sensitive information. In the upcoming slides, we will look at how some First Nation communities have used mapping and mapping applications for their land relationship visioning process. Mapping has been used in community engagement follow-up, using GIS to report back to the community, such as through a story map after a BioBlitz or community engagement event where significant species and spaces had been identified. This was a way to visually communicate with community around their identified significant species and spaces. This builds trust and community buy-in when there is follow-up after an engagement. It shows where the information provided is going, what it is being used for, and how it visually looks put together. Using mapping tools and applications has been a successful way to encourage active community participation in the development of a land relationship vision. One community used Survey 123 to collect data about turtles in the community. They created a contest with prizes and encouraged participants to enter their turtle observations using the survey form created through Survey 123. This kind of use of phone apps is great for active participation. There are many different phone applications that allow you to create forms, submit observations, take pictures, and even identify species through photos or sounds. Some LRV participant communities have used GIS to digitize old maps and create layers of community priority, taking scale map and image markup maps from engagements and using GIS to digitize what was heard at the engagement. Alternatively, updating and digitizing old maps to preserve them and keep them safe. They have created layers to account for different uses even outside of cultural and traditional, such as significant spaces including birthplaces of elders, old homesteads, recreational, current, and past gathering spaces tied to community stories. One community digitized an old traditional use map. They then conducted engagement to update the map to reflect current traditional use. They created layers to show then versus now, which showed the traditional use areas had dwindled substantially. Those changes over time were documented and shown using GIS. It is time for the practitioner's toolset number 5, choosing a mapping approach. Use the diagram in the next slide to help you choose a mapping approach for your land relationship vision. This tool is meant to support your understanding in choosing a mapping approach. By answering the questions in the diagram, you can determine what kind of mapping approach would be the most appropriate for your initiative. Try out the Earth Defenders Toolkit Tool Finder for even more mapping approaches. The engagement exercise for Module 5 is to facilitate knowledge sharing within your community, using one of the mapping methods previously discussed. The mapping process is a great way to bring community members together to share their ideas and visions, which can ignite a resurgence of interest in sharing knowledge between generations. While engaging with the community, you need to facilitate discussions by asking questions such as, why is mapping important to your community? What sites would your community like to protect? Are these sites culturally significant? Do they have species at risk? The most useful mapping method to use for this exercise would be hands-on mapping or scale map and image markup. All you need to do is invite community members to share their knowledge and provide a space to write down information. Print out a large map of your community or a space you wish to learn more about. Invite members to identify significant spaces and habitats that they find valuable. Allow community members to mark up the map and visit with one another as they discuss the past, present, and future relationship with the land. The result of this engagement will be a map, or more than one map, that you can use as a reference when implementing a land relationship visioning report with community priorities. At the end of Module 5, you should have an understanding of the importance of mapping to inform land relationship visioning. You should understand that there are various methods of mapping. Some ways are easier than others, but all are valuable. You should also understand that the community engagement for this module will provide the community with a simple way to share their knowledge and will result in valuable information and community connection to the project. Module 6, Understanding Climate Change to Inform the Vision, Contemplating a Community Climate Data Profile. In this section, we will review what is climate data, indigenous climate knowledge, Western climate science, how climate change impacts land relationship visioning, and the tool and engagement. Climate change is a long-term shift in the average weather conditions of a region, such as its typical temperature, rainfall, and windiness. Climate change means that the range of conditions expected in many regions will change over the coming decades. This means that there will also be changes in extreme conditions. The climate varies naturally from year to year and decade to decade. This is caused by natural processes linking the atmosphere, ocean, and land, as well as variations in heat output from the sun. In addition to changes in climate that are caused by natural climate variability, climate change can be caused by human activity. The kind of climate change we are experiencing now is being caused primarily by these human factors. This is another way to think about weather and climate. Weather is about what you are going to wear each day. Is it raining, snowing, hot, or cold? Weather is about specific conditions at a specific location and time. Climate tells you what kinds of clothing and outdoor stuff you have available to use for the whole year. Therefore, climate is about what kinds of weather you anticipate over the year, and from year to year. It is the long-term statistics of weather. You might have rain or snow boots, even if you only use them in 1 or 2 seasons. If the climate changes and we don't adapt our clothing and outdoor equipment, then we might not be prepared for the weather. The same goes for our communities. Risk refers to the possibility of a negative outcome or loss occurring, while a variable is a factor that can change or vary, such as more heat, loss of cold, and changes in precipitation. There are many risks and variables to consider with climate change. In terms of climate change, climate risk can mean the possibility of drought, dry land, and low water for travel, risks to ecosystems such as shifting habitat and permafrost thaw in the north, the potential for flooding due to more heavy rain events and winter flooding from rain or thaw, decreased food security due to changes in fish spawning and changing migratory patterns, negative impacts to health such as heat illness, vector-borne disease, and mental stress, unstable infrastructure from damage due to increased storms, power outages, poor water quality, and more. Impacts to transportation because of shorter winter road seasons and unreliable ice predictions. The potential of wildfire and damage to community, species habitat, and poor air quality. This is not an exhaustive list of risks, and you should do some research about risks specific to your community to understand how climate change can impact your land relationship vision. What is climate data? Climate data refers to decades of observations and changes in weather patterns over time. Western climate data defines climate as the statistical representation of weather. Climate statistics are based on decades of weather station data that is turned into averages, like the average high temperature in the summer. Indigenous climate knowledge refers to environmental observations over time of seasonal patterns and changes in the predictability of those patterns. Informing a holistic land relationship vision. Western climate data can be used to complement community knowledge. Etuapt Mumk Two-Eyed Seeing is a guiding principle developed by Mi'kmaq elder Albert Marshall that recognizes that better outcomes are more likely if we bring two or more perspectives into collaboration. Resilience and adaptation, climate change, threats to indigenous knowledge. Climate data can be used to inform land relationship visioning. LRV can be used as a process to understand the past and present to inform the future. Changes in climate means changes in cycles and patterns of seasonal activities, which results in unpredictability of traditional knowledge. An example of this would be the changes in ice conditions. Ice conditions are increasingly sporadic, less predictable, and therefore knowledge around ice thickness and seasonal patterns becomes unreliable. Indigenous knowledge systems are critical for adapting to the changing climate, including maintenance and revitalization of culture, food and water security, healthy lands and waters, economic development, community infrastructure, and health and well-being. Gathering community climate knowledge. How to ask community about history and observed changes. When we discuss climate change, there may be a disconnect between changes that have been observed and the causes of those changes. Changes over time that directly relate to a changing climate might be less time each winter with dependable ice, decreased use of ice roads or ice fishing, increased presence of ticks and tick-borne diseases, decrease in health and quality of wild game and fish, increased amounts of flooding, decrease in predictability, increased wildfire risk and severity of fire, decrease in air quality, increase in lung disease, and changes in timing of seasonal activities, gathering and harvesting food earlier in the season, changes in migration patterns of birds and other wildlife. Western science is one knowledge system, among other knowledge systems, and can be used to complement community-based knowledge. Western science knowledge can complement community knowledge, indigenous knowledge, and traditional ecological knowledge. Western science makes use of observations and measurements. The photo shows an instrument tower that scientists use to measure the way that water vapor and energy are exchanged between the land and the air. The tower also has instruments measure other aspects of the climate, like air temperature, incoming and outgoing solar radiation, greenhouse gases, and wind speed and direction. Western science also often makes use of mathematical models to model the relationships between physical processes like the exchange of water vapor and energy between air, oceans, and land. This can help to understand the world around us, and also to understand what kinds of changes we can anticipate in the future. Future climate, future generations. The results from the climate models show us climate changes over time for each different emissions scenario. These are shown by the lines on the graph. Different amounts of global greenhouse gas emissions lead to different amounts of warming, which is shown by the high, medium, and low lines on the graph. The climate of the past, which elders will have experienced and have knowledge of, has already changed. The climate will continue to change, so children born today will live with impacts through this century. What kinds of climate data are there? Climate data is derived from understanding climate variables, such as more heat, changes in rain and snow, and loss of cold. Different kinds of data speaks to different variables. In general, climate data speaks to the days, frequency, increases and decreases of heat, precipitation, and loss of cold. Some modeling results are more certain than others, leading to different levels of confidence. The material on this slide has been adapted from Climate Resilient Buildings and Core Public Infrastructure. Report, Plain Language Summary, Climate Modeling and Analysis. What are confidence levels based on? Amount of evidence, including observations and model results. How much the climate models agree. How well scientists understand detailed physical processes, like how clouds form, and their ability to directly model them. Confidence is related to how well we understand the physical processes affecting these variables, whether or not these processes can be represented directly in climate models, and also on the amount of evidence describing how these variables have changed from station observations. Tier 1, most confidence. Temperature. There is a generally high or very high confidence in the future projections of temperature since we have a good understanding of the processes involved. Temperature is directly related to the level of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere, and there is a strong body of evidence that deals with the causes of observed changes. Tier 2, medium confidence. Precipitation. We have generally medium confidence in the future projections of precipitation and precipitation-related variables. We have some understanding of the processes that lead to future changes in precipitation, and there is some evidence linking the causes of observed changes at large scales, but generally this evidence is less extensive than it is for Tier 1 variables and tends to show less consistency. Some precipitation processes can be represented by physical equations, but the finer scale processes, such as convective thunderstorms, can only be represented directly in very high resolution regional climate models. Tier 3, low confidence. Wind, snow loads, humidity. We have low or very low confidence in the future projections of wind, snow loads, and humidity. These variables have not been widely studied in the published literature, and we don't necessarily understand the physical processes very well. Underlying topography, for example, can have a large influence on these variables, making it difficult to obtain robust information at the local scale from the coarse-scale global climate models. Western climate science can support indigenous-led climate work by providing data for leadership and communities, band council, staff and consultants, and researchers, educators, and students. Youth and community climate workshops, strategic directions, data to bridge with traditional knowledge systems, funding and grant applications, emergency planning, environment, climate, and health policies, land use and environmental management, habitat, harvesting, and food security programs, facilities, housing, infrastructure planning and design, climate research projects, and climate presentations can all be supported by Western climate science. Some good resources for finding future climate data is climatedata.ca and climateatlas.ca. Using these online tools, you can begin to understand risks and variables for your community. Climate changes results in different variables that impact ecosystems. Variables such as more heat, loss of cold, and changes in precipitation can change the function of an ecosystem. Ecosystems have traditionally been sustained in a balanced way, informed by indigenous knowledge. Climate change disrupts the consistency in seasonal patterns, threatening the health of ecosystems and the knowledge that has been gathered through generations. Ecosystem changes due to climate change will heavily impact a land relationship vision. You can anticipate these changes will have effects on traditional activities and knowledge, community health and well-being, property and infrastructure, and impacts on traditional food sources, security, and safety. In planning for the future, you need to understand what to expect and the changes to anticipate. You can then decide on actions to adapt to or mitigate the impacts. Using climate data to inform LRV, adaptation versus mitigation. Understanding climate data and future projections will allow an informed approach to the development of your land relationship vision, which may include adaptation or mitigation goals. Although adaptation and mitigation are very similar and often lead into each other, they mean different things. Adaptation is the process of adjustment to actual or expected climate and its effects. Doing what we can to live with and minimize destruction and suffering from climate change. Adaptation is addressing the effect and not the cause. Mitigation is the human intervention to reduce the sources or enhance the sinks of greenhouse gas. Adaptation and mitigation build resiliency to climate change. Climate adaptation actions. Maintain ecological integrity and support community relationship to the land. Dibaginjigadeg Anishinaabe Ejitwad, a tribal climate adaptation menu, contains 14 strategies and approaches to adaptation. Strategy 4. Sustain fundamental ecological and cultural functions. You are encouraged to consult this valuable resource to further understand adaptation actions you can incorporate into your land relationship vision. Dibaginjigadeg Anishinaabe Ejitwad, a tribal climate adaptation menu. Strategy 4. Sustain fundamental ecological and cultural functions, speaks to actions that can be incorporated into land relationship visioning. 4.1. Maintain or restore hydrology and soils. Climate change is expected to alter hydrology and soils in many ways, including changes in stream flow, snowpack, soil moisture, flooding, and drought. 4.2. Maintain or restore riparian areas. Forests in riparian areas decrease soil erosion, filter water, cool stream temperatures, and provide habitat corridors for wildlife and plant beings. 4.3. Maintain or restore water quality. Clean water is one of the most important gifts we receive from the natural world. Climate change may reduce water quality in a variety of ways, such as through changes in nutrient levels and increased sediment loading. 4.4. Support specific plants or plant communities with essential requirements. Adaptation actions often target certain beings and ensure that they can grow to their fullest potential. 4.5. Revitalize and maintain Anishinaabe Aingi cultural use of fire as a stewardship tool. Restoring cultural fire regimes in fire-adapted systems can benefit fire-dependent and fire-tolerant beings. These actions can also create more complex ecosystem structure and reduce the risk of severe wildfire on the landscape. 4.6. Maintain and revitalize cultural approaches to harvesting and caretaking. Using traditional harvesting and caretaking methods can be an important way to sustain ecological functions in a given area. Consult with the Tribal Climate Adaptation Menu to learn more about adaptation actions and sustaining fundamental ecological and cultural functions. It's time for the Practitioner's Toolset for Module 6, Climate Change Vulnerability and Adaptation Planning Framework Tool. The tool for this module is a Climate Change Vulnerability and Adaptation Planning Framework tool developed by Georgina Island First Nation. Use this planning framework tool to gain an understanding of the risks and vulnerabilities associated with climate change and how these risks and vulnerabilities may impact your land relationship vision. Organize community engagement workshops to learn about past changes using specific examples or important resources as discussion points. Observations of climate change will be communicated differently depending on the overall understanding of the changing climate. Connections to seasonal activities and impacts or changes over time will inform a vulnerability assessment and adaptation planning. Use the survey template tool within the Module 6 tool to begin to engage and gather knowledge. Key takeaways for Module 6, Understanding Climate Change, will inform the future conditions of the land, which will inform your land relationship vision. There are many different kinds of knowledge that can contribute to a community's understanding of climate change. Understanding risk and vulnerability will help you plan adaptation measures for the sustainability of the long-term implementation of your land relationship vision. Module 7, Using Land Relationship Visioning as a Collaborative Tool to Connect with Community and Outside Partners. In this section, we will discuss mutually beneficial collaboration, connecting with community, connecting interdepartmentally, connecting to outside partners, tool, LRV contact directory, engagement, LRV festival. Land relationship visioning extends beyond land stewardship or species and spaces documentation. It is a pathway for community to become engaged with land's initiatives. It is also an opportunity to build off of existing structures and programming within the community through collaboration with other departments. LRV is an opportunity to network, utilize resources, and build capacity with external agencies. You can also reach out to other First Nation communities to collaborate on training opportunities or learn from each other about effective engagement approaches. Connect to community. Community identified needs and priorities are integral to land relationship visioning. Land relationship visioning is an opportunity to connect with community. Connect community to the past, present, and future. Share and communicate in a way that allows community to grasp the intention and importance of LRV. That connection can form a sense of responsibility to uphold the vision. Ensure virtual participation for off-reserve members and others who can't be in person. Connect to community. Youth. Youth will inherit the vision and should feel responsibility towards it. Engage with youth through relevant and innovative tools and apps, like those explored for mapping and BioBlitz. Build capacity and spark interest in the environment and land-based activities and traditions. Champion youth who have connection to the land and allow them to lead. Facilitate connection between youth and their history and cultural ties to the land. Give them ownership and responsibility of future. Elders and knowledge holders are integral to land relationship visioning. They help understand the past to envision the future. Oftentimes, elders love the opportunity to share stories and histories. It is important to invite organic conversation, simply listening to stories and asking where to determine significant spaces. Connect elders with youth and younger generations to hear the stories and community history. Communication creates trust. Share with them exactly where shared information is going and how it is being used. You might have to build a case to get buy-in. Truly understand why LRV is important and communicate that effectively to elders. Take everything they say into consideration and always offer thanks. Make sure you keep notes about who shared what, so the source of knowledge is not lost. Meet them where they are at. It is important to allow for organic conversation. The foundation of land relationship visioning is understanding our responsibilities to lands, water, and future generations. Communicating and engaging community about LRV gives the community an avenue to connect to the land. Community or traditional territory allows community to understand and participate in lands initiatives and capacity building around stewardship. This is also a chance for off-reserve members to connect tangibly to the lands and waters of community and traditional territory. LRV is a multi-beneficial process that can be utilized in a variety of ways within community. It can be used as a wellness tool, as an engagement tool, as a community planning tool, a management and maintenance planning tool, and more. It can be used in many different ways outside of the Lands and Environment Department. LRV is an opportunity to work together with different departments, creating connections and working towards mutually beneficial initiatives. Some departments that directly connect with land relationship visioning are Lands and Estates, Capital Assets and Public Works, Youth and Elder Programming, Education, Community Health and Social Services, Consultation, and Culture. This may require leadership buy-in, and it is important to remember that departments have their own priorities and mandates. That being said, there is a lot of opportunity for mutually beneficial initiatives, and these opportunities should be identified. Depending on your land regime, it might be good to know what property is held in common and what is held by certificate of possession. This is important to understand so that initiatives are most efficient. Species know no borders. Lands and estates hold the information that informs this. Lands and estates might also have old use maps that could inform a land relationship vision or need to be updated as part of the visioning process. Land relationship visioning can inform management and maintenance planning within the Public Works Department. As a department who is on the ground, in community every day, they observe a lot in terms of species and spaces. Public Works is tasked with the physical maintenance of the land, such as yard maintenance, snow shoveling, ditch maintenance, and utilization of different equipment. If species at risk or significance are identified, Public Works should know so that they are aware of species to be careful around. An example would be if there are initiatives happening such as turtle nesting. Public Works should know so that they do not disturb nests, trot turtles, and avoid habitat destruction. If there are breeding birds in certain areas at certain times of year, disturbance to that area should be minimal for a specific time, such as cutting grass when there are ground nesting birds. If there is important native species that are medicinal or host plants for endangered species, Public Works should know so that they don't disturb them. Youth and elder programming. Utilize existing programs to reach specific community members, such as when elder programming is happening. Use that as an engagement opportunity for TK interviews. If there is youth programming such as youth group or PA day programming, use those times to approach youth in order to communicate about LRV and facilitate activities for active participation in LRV. Similarly, if your community has a daycare, use those resources to reach children, youth, and their families to engage them in the LRV process. It is always easier to use existing structures rather than hold a one-off event that is an additional event for members to attend and might be attended with low participation. Utilize what is already working. Working with the education department is a good way to reach students of all ages, on and off reserve. Education programming could fuse with LRV community engagements. High school volunteer hours are an opportunity to employ youth volunteers in LANS initiatives. There is also the potential to connect with students who may be pursuing relevant studies to LRV. This is a good way to reach students who are not actively living in community. Health and social services programming often includes elder and youth programming. With climate change to consider when developing a land relationship vision, there will be identified impacts to health due to the changing climate. The health team would be best positioned to help understand those impacts. There may be opportunity to collaborate for a mutually beneficial engagement session that informs land relationship visioning and health in the community. Land relationship visioning can help to assert rights and make informed decisions. The consultation department can be a key collaborator for LRV. They may have maps about treaties and associated rights, or legislated protected species and spaces within community and treaty territory. They may have key information on some things that should be prioritized in terms of rights assertion. Utilize cultural programming to approach knowledge carriers about traditional ecological knowledge and community history. You can partner for engagements and programming where on-the-land activities and traditional use activities are prioritized. This will inform the vision. The Land Relationship Visioning Toolkit has been used to bridge connections between First Nation communities and external partners for collaboration. You can use the LRV process and tool to connect with post-secondary institutions, nonprofit organizations, and environmental non-governmental organizations, as well as other First Nation communities working on similar initiatives. Post-secondary institutions have access to many resources that can build capacity in community and contribute substantially to data collection for land relationship visioning. There are often master's and PhD students looking for research that can apply Western scientific surveying methods and technical expertise with Indigenous knowledge. This can create opportunities for mutually beneficial capacity building and partnership opportunities, often free of charge. It is important to be mindful of data security and sovereignty in these instances. An example of this can be found online by clicking the underlined like or searching Laurentian University, a new train of thought. Conservation authorities are local watershed management agencies unique to Ontario. They deliver services and programs to protect and manage impacts on water and other natural resources. There may be mutual goals when developing and implementing a land relationship vision. The LRV process has been used by First Nation communities and conservation authorities as a reconciliation tool, using LRV to understand Indigenous worldview and focus on First Nation needs and priorities outside of legislated species at risk for the co-creation of a site management plan. This may be a good approach to reciprocal relations and meaningful relationship building. environmental non-governmental organizations. Seek partnerships to build capacity and gain external support. ENGOs may have resources and access to potential funding and outward networks for training and other capacity development. They may also have like-minded initiatives and information that can feed into the land relationship visioning process. One example of this is the partnerships between Indigenous nations and the Wildlife Conservation Society Canada. Key Biodiversity Areas Initiative. Key Biodiversity Areas, KBAs, are sites that contribute to the persistence of biodiversity. Based on internationally standardized quantitative criteria, KBAs are places that support rare and at-risk species and ecosystems and key life stages, e.g., migration, hibernation, etc. Find out more about KBAs and the KBA program at kbacanada.org. The KBA Canada initiative is committed to maintaining a space for collaboration and creation of KBA information with Indigenous communities and groups. If you are interested in revising existing KBA information or boundaries, in investigating new potential KBAs, or in seeing how KBAs may be able to support your stewardship and conservation work, please contact KBA at kbacanada.org. Work with other First Nation communities to learn from each other. Work with others who have the same goals or have successfully completed work that you want to do. Network and utilize those networks to see what has worked or hasn't worked in other communities. Lean on each other for support. Share funding for group trainings and other capacity development opportunities. Seek out other First Nation communities that are working towards a land relationship vision or who have established and successful programs that contribute to LRV. Practitioner's Toolset. Important digital resources to build knowledge and capacity. In your digital package, you will find the following supporting digital tools. The GR5A, LRV Contact Directory Template, and the GR5B, Department Partnership Planning Template. Use these tools to organize LRV contacts and plan for department collaboration. Engagement Exercise, Community Land. Relationship, Visioning Festival. Create a space to connect with relevant departments and external organizations to learn about LRV and potential collaborative relationships. Identify and invite external agencies that may want to collaborate or contribute to the development of a land relationship vision. Use this event as a way to engage with community, hand out surveys for feedback, ensure there is food and door prizes. Module 7. Key Takeaways. There are many different collaborations that can happen with mutually beneficial outcomes. Use LRV to increase department capacity and efficiency in programming and engagement efforts. Prioritize facilitating a connection between youth and elders for the most fulsome and beneficial LRV that ensures ownership and responsibility for the future. Module 8. Using your vision to guide community decisions. Developing a land relationship assessment report to guide community-based decisions and processes. In this section, we will discuss the key information to include in a report. This includes the introduction, background and purpose, the methods, the findings and analysis, and the next steps, report conclusions. We will also discuss how to apply your assessment report and then review the tool and engagement idea. There are main sections that are often included in general assessment reports that should also be included when developing a land relationship assessment report. The introduction, background, and purpose sections answer questions such as why was this report completed? What was the purpose of your work? The methods section comes next and answers questions such as who was involved in your project? When did the work occur? How did you obtain your information? Where are the areas represented in this report? After the methods sections, you have the results, findings and analysis, and then next steps and recommendations. Introduction, background, and purpose. Why was this work completed? What is the purpose of the report? The first section in your assessment report describes why you undertook this work. If your community has an overall vision statement, use it here and explain how your work relates to the vision. If you had specific goals and objectives for your work, list them here. If you were motivated to do this work by Indigenous knowledge, values, and teachings, explain that in this section. Finally, if your project had a specific focus, record that here. For example, terrestrial assessment, aquatic assessment, species at risk assessment, biocultural species assessment, habitat or ecosystem assessment, and/or natural spaces of particular importance to your community. Methods. Who was involved in your project? The second section of your report is a space to record the methods in which you went about collecting information. This includes who was involved in your project, including community involvement. Who is writing this report? Which department? Who to contact for more information? Who did the field work, including any volunteers and contributions from the community? If you involved others from outside of the community, as resource people, list them, their affiliation, and role. Methods. When did the work occur? How did you obtain your information? The second section of your report is also a space to record when the work occurred and how the information was gathered. A project timeline would be a useful graphic. Include dates of community engagement sessions and field work, and other dates for activities that went into creating this report. Describe your methods, especially if you used established surveying or landscape assessment methods, so someone else can replicate your work in the future. Methods. Where did the work occur? This section of your report is also a space to record where the work happened. Describe where all activities occurred, including community mapping events and field work. Provide a map of locations identified by community members or locations where field work happened or will happen in the future. This is a good spot to utilize multimedia and internet-based mapping tools. Results, findings, and analysis. What did you find? This section of your report is a space to discuss the outcome of your work. Summarize field forms, checklists, and assessments. Tables and checklists can be presented here or included as appendices to your report. Summarize any community engagement sessions. What did you hear? A simple bulleted list of comments is enough, or a summary of survey results. Include participants list as appendices to your report. You can show digitized maps with information collected, or you can scan marked up paper maps to be included. Results, findings and analysis. Did you collect sensitive information? This section of your report may include sensitive information that you wish to protect. Information such as locations of species at risk or important areas in your community should be protected. Communities may collect information during this process that they may want to protect, and should build their report in a way that keeps that information protected. If there is sensitive information, Keep it in a separate section of the report that can be taken out when sharing more publicly. Sensitive species information, sensitive cultural information, and indigenous traditional knowledge can all be considered sensitive information that should be protected. Next steps, report conclusions. Is there more work to be completed? This work may represent a first step in your work, or may be part of a much larger project. Make note of that in this section. Reflect on the project. What worked? What didn't work? What would you have done differently? What did you learn? And what would you like to do next? This work likely got you thinking about next steps, more assessment work, concerns you or the community might have noted, opportunities you or the community identified, etc. Record these points here. Based on your reflections, highlight your key findings and recommendations from this work. After you have finished compiling your land relationship assessment report, you can use your findings to apply recommendations and next steps. You need to look at the information collected and determine what can be done next with it. Do you wish to collect more information? Is there a need for more assessment work? Are there areas that should be monitored and protected? Have threats and mitigation measures been identified? Are there areas that need focused stewardship? Are there areas that could be developed on and areas that can't? Is there need or interest in more community engagement and education? Can we partner with or learn from other communities doing similar work? Are there other funding partners or external allies to be approached? It is important to know how the land relationship assessment report will be applied in the community so that next steps can be identified. The Practitioner's Toolset number 8 is a report template to aid in the development of a land relationship assessment report. Your digital package contains a Word document LRV report template. Use this template to report on the LRV process so far, compiling collected information from research and community. Refer to the information within this module and throughout the entire toolkit to guide you when developing the report. The engagement exercise for this module is to report back to your community on key findings. Show your community the results from data they collected throughout the modules. You can present to community through meetings or to chief and council, lands managers, and other community departments. Community members will keep engaged for new projects if they know what their knowledge and suggestions contributed to. Land relationship visioning is an ongoing process that will evolve over time if you keep community engaged. Module 8, Key Takeaways. Information gathered throughout the LRV process should be contained in a report that summarizes the overall land relationship vision. You should be able to identify key information to include in your report. You should also have an understanding and ideas for applying your assessment report. Keep sensitive information protected by including a section in your report that can easily be removed when sharing with an audience outside of the community. Using the information and tools in this toolkit, the practitioner should have a document ready to guide their land relationship vision, as identified by their community. You should feel equipped with the knowledge and tools to gather information that will help formulate a land relationship vision. This toolkit was produced by Cambium Indigenous Professional Services, commissioned by the Canada Wildlife Service of Environment and Climate Change Canada, with thanks to the Ontario Aboriginal Lands Association for their advice and expertise. Content authors, design and production, Cassandra McKeown, Michael Jacobs, Cambium Indigenous Professional Services. Contributors. Thank you to everyone who shared their direction, advice, and guidance on this project. Andrea Kettle, Victoria Leck, Christina Rowe, Liz Sauer, Lee Voisin, Canadian Wildlife Service, Environment and Climate Change Canada, and the Ontario Aboriginal Lands Association. A special thank you to Deborah Sparks and Tara Shuchenko, Invasive Species Center, for their invaluable contribution to Module 4. Thank you to Cassie Chanin and Niels Bonfils, University of Toronto, for their invaluable contribution to Module 5.